Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Thanks for tuning in. This is Bite-Sized Agency Briefs. I'm your host, Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach agency owners to build the agency of their dreams. Today, I am speaking with Tracy Goodheart. She's the founder of the PR Accelerator, which is a different kind of PR company. Simply put, she helps individuals and brands nail their messaging and attract positive, sustained media attention without a publicist, which is pretty exciting. I'm very pumped to dig into that. Also, Tracy's a marketing teacher. She teaches globally for the University of Chicago, and she has in her career advised more than 75 brands on their marketing. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us you're in Michigan, right?
Yeah, we're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Thanks for having me, Steve. Really great
Awesome.
to be here.
Yeah, excited to kind of dig into what you're doing with PR Accelerator and how you've kind of seen the landscape of marketing and messaging and what you call like sustained media without the need for a publicist for agencies and all. But talk about how what your journey's been and how you've gotten to where you are now and what you're up to.
Yeah, so my background is I was a journalist for many years. I worked in the media for 15 years. My first job, I was a reporter at Time Magazine in Washington, D.C. And when I was there, around 2006, I was covering the rise of Facebook and the rise of social media. And that really propelled me on a very different career in journalism, which was helping journalists figure out how to use social media to cover breaking news. And one of the biggest stories I covered in my career was the shootings at Virginia Tech in 2007. And I was one of the first reporters in the country to use Facebook to find eyewitnesses to the shooting, to this experience. And I ended up going into this new career direction where I was figuring out what does the future of the media look like and how do we help journalists report in this crazy new world we all found ourselves in. And so I did that for many years. I worked at Time and I worked at Tribune Company. And then I worked at Crane Communications, which publishes Advertising Age. And I was their global social media director at that media company. And my job was to really help journalists, again, navigate this crazy new world. And I ended up leaving the company and for many years was a consultant for brands and for individuals on marketing communications. And people kept hiring me saying, you're a journalist, really. I mean, truly a journalist. Like, we need you to help us get our message out and get press. But they were hiring me for something else. It was kind of like an add-on. And I never saw myself as a publicist because I'm not trained as a publicist. And I kept getting free press for friends and clients. And somebody's like, you should charge for this. I was like, but I don't want to be a publicist. And no knock on publicists. It's just a lifestyle.
I was going to say, what's wrong with being a publicist?
Nothing.
Okay.
I am sometimes a publicist. It's the lifestyle. I've been pretty public about this, but I have a chronic illness. And so I can't be working 60, 80, 90 hour work weeks. It's just not possible. And so I wanted to create a business that was sustainable for me, but also help my clients. And that became the PR Accelerator, which I launched like in beta mode last year and then fully this past year.
Awesome. Very exciting. If you think back to like what you might have projected out back in 2007 of what social media was going to be like and how it was going to be leveraged by brands, do you remember what those projections were? And do you see that we are where you thought we would be?
Oh gosh, in 2007, I thought social media was going to save the world. Like I was drinking from the Kool-Aid. I mean, if that's the phrase, and I really believed in the concept of citizen journalism, which was really new back in 2007, 2008. In fact, I worked at an experimental newspaper called Trib Local, which was owned by the Chicago Tribune. And the whole concept was citizen journalists working alongside traditional journalists. In fact, that inspired me to pitch the Tribune on this idea of creating an entire social network that lived within the ecosystem of the Chicago Tribune, wherein we would be getting content from users, personalizing their news feeds across all channels. That was in 2008. Unfortunately, it was technically impossible to build that at the time. And what we built was a blog network and was very successful in its own right. But the media did not go in the direction that I'd hoped it would go. And I think there's a lot of reasons behind that. I think the biggest one was the money. the advertising model completely collapsed with the rise of social media and digital advertising. And magazines and newspapers weren't smart enough or had the resources enough to invest in their own technology. And so much of my job was putting like our content on social media, hoping that people would come back to the news sites to be subscribers. And unfortunately, that also didn't work. Yeah. And so now you see media companies actually pulling themselves off of Twitter/X and telling their reporters you don't have to do as much on social media because it's not worth the investment. So it's pretty kind of been a disillusioning in a lot of ways. I think there's a lot of excitement though around nonprofit journalism, around, new models of getting content out. We're seeing a lot of people do stuff with newsletters right now. We're seeing podcasts really having their prime moment. I think it's just going to look very differently than any of us expected it to.
Yeah, I guess it's had various phases or stages, I guess you could say. I think it's very tumultuous right now. I think, past couple of years, there's been just so much aligned with fake news and, even like the deep fakes, and forget about the politics of it all. But Chase, you mentioned it, like the money of it and chasing the dollar and how ad platforms have shifted so heavily. Yeah, it's an interesting landscape. And so how are you seeing, the clients that you work with now, how are you seeing them leveraging social media differently than they have in previous years?
Yeah. So, I tell clients actually not to put that much effort into social media now because they're just not going to see the ROI. Even, my clients who have 50 or 80,000 Instagram followers, most of those people are not clicking through to buy anything often. Yeah. And it's like, is that worth your time and energy to be creating so much content, giving so much away? And I would argue, not really. I really want to see my clients spend more time getting press, for example, because what we do when we get press, all sorts of benefits. One is you reach new audiences. Two is it gives you a massive credibility factor. And then three is the SEO of it all, right? You get those lucrative backlinks to your website. Those last for years. Instagram won't give you that same ROI.
So do you...
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, I'm sure you understand like the peso model, paid earned, shared and owned. Mm-hmm. So you encourage your clients to lean more into that earned model of media coverage, whether it's through pitching or organically just getting picked up for being so great at what they do?
Absolutely. So Jeannie Dietrich is from Chicago like me, and she created an amazing model. I actually teach that in my class at UC. Okay. Owned for sure. Well, owned is key. You definitely need owned because when you're pitching journalists, they're going to go to your website. They're going to Google you. You want to be able to have a strong first impression and be able to control the narrative as much as you can. But earned is really going to get you that credibility factor that's important because you can talk about yourself all day, but unless, other people are saying that it's legit, does it really mean anything?
Right.
That's why I push for that. Social, I would say, shared, I would say you do need to be out there. You do need to be consistent because journalists are also looking at your social media. And if you haven't been active in 2 or 3 years, they're going to, what's up with that? Like it's kind of an expectation that there's some sort of life on your social media. They're also looking at who's following you. So it is important that there's influential people following you, especially if you want to be considered a thought leader in your industry. But I would just say, do the minimum often and really put your energy elsewhere.
Yeah. And when you're working with clients, you're working on what their messaging is and kind of their marketing and media plan and how do they take that messaging to market. What are some of the things that you explore in like, whether it's a messaging matrix or, are you focusing on mission, vision, values, or more like when somebody asks this is what you say?
So I create what I call a messaging system, and my messaging system is a factual-based system. So coming from a marketing perspective, you're always thinking more about the sales side of it. Like, how do we get them to convert? Journalists hate that stuff. Journalists just want the facts. They're going to strip it all away anyway, so just make it easy for them. And so what we create for my clients, what I work with them to create is this messaging system that is very streamlined and just covers the basics, like your overview of what you do, what you offer, your origin story, your value proposition, your methodology, your approach, your mission statement, and your elevator pitch, right? And so if you have all those things in there, it's going to be a lot easier for you to do all of your communications. It's also going to be easier for your employees to stay on message. I think so often we complicate things for our employees and we change it a lot that they don't actually know what they're supposed to be saying. So this helps solve for that as well.
Yeah. And then are you like training them for like media training, or so they're not like sounding so robotic and memorized, and how to talk more organically about these things?
Yeah, so also as part of the messaging system, what we can create are their talking points, and these would be more for the people who will be doing the interviews typically. So that just really helps them be able to easily answer reporters' questions. But those talking points can also be useful for sales teams as well. They can be useful for employees to talk about the brand as well. So we do create that, and it can become more, sophisticated or more multi-layered if there are multiple stakeholders that need to use it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so what are some of as an example, what are some of the things that agency owners can either think about for themselves from their messaging systems, or for their clients that like they need to kind of dig into or avoid even? What are some things to avoid?
What to avoid? Gosh, I'm trying to think. I'm just thinking through my clients' messaging systems that we've created. I think my clients often make things way more complicated than they need to be. We often think that we need to use very big words or to make things sound really impressive, when really it's, what is it? Why do I need it? And why are you different? Like, those are the main questions. Again, what is it? Why do I need it? And why are you different? That's going to help people start to place it in their head. And they'll start to think, oh, maybe I need this. Maybe I don't need it. Maybe my friend needs it. And so I'm going to tell my friend about this company instead. I will say also, I have a background working in advertising. So I did a stint doing business development for a small agency in Chicago. And I had never experienced the ad world before, like the inside of the ad world. And it blew my mind how, there was all of this like theatrics to everything we did. And I thought that was somewhat of a disservice, because if every agency is doing this theatrical thing, then everybody's the same. And so I was always like, well, can't we just explain kind of the basics and what it is and what our approach is and why it's different? And what I also love doing with them is bringing out the expertise of their employees. So I did a lot of ghostwriting for their executive team, telling their own perspective on their approach to advertising. And that content did really, really well. And it helped them communicate more effectively. And it also helped the agency team members understand who these people were and how they thought about things.
Did the team members know that you were ghostwriting?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so they still felt like, oh, boss man, boss lady really like leans into this, even though it was you writing it for them?
Well, so my approach to ghostwriting is probably 90% the client's words. So I'm just shaping what they say to me. It was interesting when I did that ghostwriting, one of the executive producers at the firm was just like, you need to get back into this. Like, you are really good at this. Mm-hmm. And that was shortly thereafter I quit and went back to working for myself, doing largely ghostwriting. So thank you to him.
Yeah, thanks to him for the push. I love that. But that's a great strategy of like senior leadership team / partners / directors, whatever, like need to be owning their own content on behalf of the brand that they work for, that they represent, the agency. I've seen a lot of failed attempts at, let's create a schedule where Tracy, you're going to write a blog post this month, and Steve, you're going to write a blog post next week. And now you've got project managers chasing employees for blog posts that they're never going to write. So having a ghostwriter like yourself, where you can like even sit around the break room and talk for 20 minutes, then turn that into a blog post. Is that kind of the route you take?
That is exactly what we did. We sat at the agency bar and they told me their life story in an hour and how they got into advertising. And I shaped it into a really cool narrative for them. And it was really cool art directed too, just seeing how the team created beautiful imagery that brought out the essence of the interview. But I think that, to your point, agencies are going in a million miles an hour in many different directions. And if write blog post is on the team members list, they're never going to do it, or they won't be excited about it. And it probably won't be aligned with the corporate goals, right? Because the goal of content should be to move the agency forward in some way. And so having a central person really owning that need is going to make for much stronger content and take the pressure off the employees.
Do you think there's other initiatives besides like there's thought leadership, there's organic lift for the website. What are the other motives behind let's get a ghostwriter or let's create our own content?
Yeah, I mean, when you are up for $1 million account, right, you got to figure out how do you differentiate yourself in every way. And if a potential client is looking at your site and look at the other site and they're just like, and they start to see consistency in one brand and real expertise coming from all of the executive team, that matters. I think it also oddly helps the communication of everybody at the company, because if they hear like the chief creative officer saying something about an approach, well, then the AD can be like, oh, yes, our chief creative officer said this, and this really defines how we view X. It just helps everybody be stronger at communicating.
That's interesting, because so you can be together in a war room, you could be together in a brainstorming session, you can be working on designs together, leaning over each other's shoulders and moving pixels around. But you might not really understand the like, as an AD or designer or whatever, you might not understand the full like thought process behind a creative direction of something until you read it on your own agency blog, or case study or white paper, what have you. That's an interesting perspective. I don't know that I ever really picked up on that as like I don't want to say an after effect, but yeah. So
I remember some of the young employees, like in their early 20s, and these pieces came out that a ghost wrote, and they looked at the executives as rock stars. Like it totally changed how they saw them. Because like, I had no idea that's how you got your start, or I had no idea you thought that way about the creative process. It was really, really cool.
I think it also brings them into more of a human view, because again, the junior team members are looking at these owners like up on a pedestal. You're probably some rich person and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, they started, probably doing paste up at a whatever back in the day, and started out doing junior graphic design intern grunt work just like everybody else. So, I think it humanizes people really well.
I will say also what we did was we created a couple for more junior or maybe mid-level employees, people that were rising in the firm and they wanted to kind of give this to them as like a good job, like you're doing great. And that also helped them, I think, really feel more elevated and kind of change the way they saw themselves in the agency. So that can be helpful as well for especially for employee retention. If you're worried about losing your star employee, you might think, I can't talk about them, I don't want them to get poached. They're going to get poached anyway. You might as well do what you can to make them feel really valued while they're there.
Yeah, and contributing content. Granted, there are definitely junior level. Well, there's people at every level that just aren't going to do the extra work. It's just not in their DNA, and so it's a good way to weed them out. But to your point, if you can find people that are willing to contribute and help elevate themselves through their own thought leadership, how are you seeing agencies, or just kind of in the general marketplace, whether it's through social or earned or whatever, like what are some of the things that you're truly seeing of like the wow factor stand out?
Like what's really popping right now?
Yeah.
I would say video is really awesome. Sure, I'm doing a lot of experiments with videos on LinkedIn right now. I think because the social networks are emphasizing video often in their algorithms, or just to get people to stay on the site, your video can do well. And most people are scared of video. Like you're putting yourself out there, talking straight to camera or something like that. But it can have a lot of oomph for you right now because there's so few people having the guts to do it. So I would say that's one. Two is I would say contributed articles are very effective. And what I mean by contributed articles is articles published on, media websites, whether it's Fast Company or Harvard Business Review or, the New York Times, if you can get into it. Those are always needed by the editors. Content is always needed. And if you are a writer or have a ghostwriter, I would focus your efforts there because it really makes a difference.
So what about those media outlets where it's pay to play, like the Forbes, agency council or the Forbes whatever council, where it's $2,500 or whatever the heck it costs now? Is that still as impactful as responding to a Harrow?
Well, Harrow's different, so I'll talk about that in a second. The Forbes play to plays, the entrepreneurs pay to plays, I just think they're too diluted now. Everybody knows that you've paid to be in Forbes, which is like, great, you had $3,000 this year. Good for you. I would not have my clients write for those publications, frankly. Harrow helping a reporter out, as most people probably know, is when you get a list email every day saying reporters are looking for these things. It can be helpful. It's super competitive now. When it first started out, it was easy, and now it's just people are fighting for that. That's why I developed my different methodology, which creates everything that clients need to earn their own press. And so I have a different method for reaching journalists and getting them to pay attention to you.
That sounds ominous and exciting. People are going to have to
Oh
reach
my
out
gosh.
to your Accelerator to learn about it.
Yeah, for sure.
On that mysterious note, I'm going to shift gears to a couple of random. We'll leave it as a cliffhanger right there, and your phone will be ringing off the hook. What is it? What is it? So yeah, I like to shift gears to a couple of random rapid fire questions, and these answers can be personal or professional, whatever suits you best. So first one is, what is something that you are binging the heck out of that you can't get enough of these days?
Oh my gosh, I just binge watched the Parisian Agency. Do you know about this show?
No.
Gosh, it's a real estate show, but It's also about a family in Paris. So it's these two parents. It's a luxury real estate kind of like scripted reality show. And it's two parents and their four adult sons who run a luxury French real estate company. And it is so good.
Okay.
I love it because it's beautiful, and they also have really great business advice about client relationships, marketing. It's phenomenal for agency people to watch.
Interesting. I'll have to check it out. What about like books, audio, or actual printed books? Are you into anything these days?
Printed books? Oh yeah. This might be ominous. I'm reading The Fourth Turning. Do you know about that? The Fourth Turning?
No.
The Fourth Turning is this theory of American history. And it was written by the originals were written in the 90s, 00s about America has these cycles of 80 years of upheaval. And currently, they're called turnings. And currently, we're apparently in another turning akin to the beginning of World War II. And it talks all about the different generational dynamics of how we're all going to interact in the years ahead during this great upheaval. It's fascinating.
Interesting.
So I read it from a news perspective because I'm trying to understand, like, okay, what's going to be happening in the years ahead? Sure. How do I steer my clients knowing we've got all of this uncertainty all around us? Great book. Highly recommend it.
Interesting. Yeah. I like the idea behind it, and certainly can create some curiosity for sure. What's a tool that you recently integrated to your like workflow or your day-to-day, again, personal, professional, on the ranch or whatever, that you look back and you're like, how did I live without this thing?
You're going to love it. Mm-hmm. It is my weekly planner. Honestly, I was trying every project management tool, and I just showed you a analog like thing I got at Target. And I was having the hardest time because I'd overscheduled myself. And I tried Monday, I tried everything. And finally, my husband was just like, why don't you just write it down every day? And just like have it on your desk. And so you'll always see how much time you have each day and not overschedule yourself. And I love it. Sure, that's not the answer you actually wanted, right? You wanted like a tech answer?
No, it actually is. Listen, I'm the first to lift up any one of my notepads of things to do. So no, my analog thing, I mentioned it a couple episodes ago. I got these quick release hose connectors for the garden hose, and they're life changing because how did I live without them before? So no, I wasn't looking for Monday.com as the answer. I was looking for what is a true answer for you.
We have one of those hoses. It's a good hose.
Yeah. So finally, what is an invaluable piece of business advice that you can impart on anybody that's listening?
Yeah, I would say the best piece of advice anybody ever gave me was when I was getting bullied at a job. And I asked her, how do I overcome the bullying? I don't want to leave my job. I love like that I got here. And she said, get external validation, because if more people know about how great you are, they can't touch you. And it was great. It was baller. Wow. Yeah, she's awesome. And that led me to going to become a TV commentator a lot. And because I was on TV all the time, nobody could touch me at my job. And I ended up getting poached by their competitor. So that is actual advice that works. Get external validation. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that leads to courage and self-confidence and self-esteem and all the things that we need that sometimes we lack. So yeah. Awesome. Tracy, thank you so much for your time, your experience and expertise. I am grateful for you today joining us.
Thanks for having me, Steve. This has been great.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. Leave a 5-star rating and a thoughtful review if you liked what you learned. If you didn't, DM me and tell me how I can make the show better. I respond to every single message and I value feedback.